Hey, Dan here, and in this video I want to share a way of thinking that is so essential, not only these days, but really something I've been talking about for years on this channel and something that will serve you in the long time, but is absolutely mission critical these days. I'm going to share about it for the short term and the long term, and at the end of the video, just for fun, because I need to talk to someone, locked in here, I'm going to share some of my theories on what's coming down, my predictions, sci-fi-esque, I will admit, for what will be happening in the world for the next 3 to 12 months, what things are going to be looking like. So the shift is about going from being reactive to proactive. Now on a day-to-day basis, what this means is you're not waking up, checking the news, responding to messages, seeing your emails go off, that you're thinking long-term. You're thinking, hey, okay, let's plan out my next week. What are my big goals? Am I trying to write a book? Am I trying to learn a language? Am I trying to finish this painting? And then you plan that out the night before and you wake up and you don't react to what's happening in the world. You don't check communications really. You don't check email or Facebook or whatever. You wake up and then you work on your plan. You're proactive. You're doing things that you've thought about in advance and plan to do. This is something I've been teaching for years, and it's absolutely essential as any kind of entrepreneur or freelancer to operate this way, or you're done from the beginning really. There's no other way to operate. And I'll admit it's becoming harder and harder to operate this way. The last few weeks, I have not been able to wake up and not check the news, not check my communication and all that. And I do think that's going to be normal for most of us for the next couple weeks at least, that we'll get stuck in this reactive, in this checking of what's going on outside. I mean, the reality is for me right now, we're in this house. We haven't left since Sunday, and we're not really going, nothing that's happening outside changes things too much. I've told my friends and family weeks ago, what I think is gonna happen in the world and to prepare. And, but nonetheless, there's something about the energy right now that's going to make us reactive. And that's why I'm reiterating this point and sharing this again, just as a reminder to try to fight back against that and do your best to be thinking ahead, thinking about the next 3 months, let's say, what do I want to accomplish? What do I want to do? Now, given the times we're in, another part of this approach that's so essential is being proactive and thinking about what you think the world will be like 3 months, 6 months, 12 months from now. Before things were pretty stable, moving along, things might change a little bit, but relative to the way they are now, relative to the way they might have been in the distant past, they were pretty freaking stable, and it was easy to plan what you wanted to do. Hey, I'll spend the next 3 months writing this book or having this trip or whatever it happens to be. And that's not going to be the case right now. And we all need to start thinking about what the world's going to look like. What are the trends? What are the changes? And how will those impact what we want to do? And then to plan around that and be proactive, make our plan based on what we think the world is going to be like, and then follow it on a day-to-day basis if we want to make the most of these times. Now, I'll probably do a few longer videos on what I think those trends are going to be, but some of them are kind of obvious, some less so. The obvious ones are people are going to be at home more, and they're going to be taking in more information. That could be online courses, that could be just social media in general. There's a huge spike on Netflix usage, on Facebook, on Instagram usage. The amount of people who are doing lives right now and are following lives on Instagram, every celebrity seems to be doing them. It makes sense, right? People are feeling disconnected and lonely, and it just makes sense. We'll see a lot more connection in that way. I also think, and at least I'm optimistic and hoping for, that there will be a trend towards getting in touch with our roots. Things like playing cards, and maybe I'm just biased and projecting here, but when we were preparing for lockdown in this place, I bought a chess set and cards and some board games and this sort of thing, and it was yeah, let's try to go old-fashioned now, because if we spend the next 15 hours a day or whatever, if you're spending all this time on social media, on the news and all that, that's not going to be mentally healthy. People already do too much of that. That is not going to be good. So I do think there's going to be a trend towards relationships, people really appreciating conversation, actually calling people up more, having video calls instead of texting just all the time. And I think you might see that trend in the future move towards things like people relearning how to sew, how to garden, how to grow their own vegetables. Not necessarily because we're going to need to grow our own vegetables, but we'll be thinking about how helpless most people are and how nice it might be to actually make things and grow things and have a little more control over our lives. So with this, there's things like learning to cook, learning to sew, learning to make stuff, physically fix stuff in your own house, to maybe make your own furniture, all these sorts of things. I think you're going to see a movement towards Obviously, there's going to be a serious lack of travel. My recently filmed course on location independence that I made for the members of my Dreamers and Doers community, yeah, probably not the most popular course right now, but I think we're going to see a spike, let's say 12 months from now or so. And I'll share a crazy prediction I have at the end of the video that's tied in with that. But this is not a uplifting topic to talk about, but we've got to be realistic now. We're going to start to see a big transfer of wealth. We're going to see people in the baby boomer generation. The death rate is going to rise. There's no way around that at this point, sadly. And that's going to mean a big shift of wealth in terms of inheritance. This is one of the wealthiest generations in history. That money is going to move to their children, who tend to be spenders, who are also going to be coming out of this time of lockdown and quarantine. And a few things will happen from that. One is people will learn to appreciate life more and think, wow, I should have been traveling more. I should have been seeing the world. Like all these things that I took for granted and never did because I was going to my job all the time. That combined with inheriting a bunch of money is going to really change people's behavior. The other thing is, as more and more people are forced to work from home, I think you're going to see people and companies stick to that. In the 4-Hour Work Week, Tim Ferriss talks about the way to get to work from home from your job is to basically say like, oh, I'm feeling sick this week, or could I just try it out? I'm really overwhelmed, and then like do it a little bit. And the more you do it, the likelihood that you just keep doing it is really high, because people, like, momentum is very powerful with people. Once we're doing something, we tend to stick to it. We're not good at changing directions. So I think you're going to see this huge amount of people who get used to working from home. Companies get used to it, and then you're going to see this inheritance, and there'll be some serious shifts in behavior, say 12 to 18 months from now with that as well. So I would not want to be in the travel industry right now, but I do think with smart planning and looking ahead, there might be a real boom 12 to 18 months. There are, of course, a ton of other trends, and I will actually make a few videos just on that, what I think looking ahead, maybe in terms of investing, but more just in terms of planning your business and life and thinking about where things will go. Now, I promised I'd share some of my more interesting predictions that so far I have only been sharing with friends. And I should say, for the past couple of months, I've been following this a lot. Two of my friends were in Beijing since the beginning of it. They're now there as well, where it's probably the safest place in the world at the moment. And so I've been following this, and then it came to Spain early, so I was following it here as well. And I've generally been ahead of the curve in terms of predicting things, and it served me very well in terms of not being surprised by any of this, in terms of preparations, food. Like, we've got a month of food here, and it's not crappy food. It's like, everything we could want to eat. And so I'm going to continue this trend and see if I'm on point with any of this stuff, but I think I am. So last week I started talking to friends about how what I think is going to happen is they're going to have this antibody test, which will be a test not to see if you have the virus, but if you had the virus. And then what's going to happen is people who've had it are going to either, number one, return to work early and just go back to normal, or number two, actually be able to help out more, like volunteer at hospitals, deliver food, like go to places where being immune to this virus could be really, really useful for society. I think how those people are used will depend on the extremes of the society, right? How overwhelmed the system is with cases and everything else. And maybe with that, there'd be some kind of identification system, something probably you have to wear externally that you can only get from the government, where if you fake it, it's a massive fine or jail time. Let's say jail time's probably a good move. And that allows you to move around freely. Then I thought, well, what's naturally going to follow that? Well, naturally, you're going to have young, healthy people who will say, okay, I'm going to go out of my way to get exposed to this, because then I will have the virus, and then I'll have a few weeks in quarantine. Like, if they do it responsibly, which I think people would. So they get the virus, then they're in quarantine, but then they can go free. So it's kind of worth getting, because you're already in basically quarantine everywhere. Then I was thinking, well, probably the government might actually encourage this, because governments are very, very concerned with money and the economy. So they might actually say, hey, this is not, something we're making anyone do, but if you're young and healthy and have no pre-existing conditions, you'll do a week before to boost your immune system. We'll give you all these vitamins and drugs and sunshine and whatever, and then you'll get it. You'll have a 3-week quarantine, and then afterwards you can go back and work. But in order to do this program and be officially like certified or whatever, you have to commit 1 day a week to serving society at the very least, where you'll do things that it's safer to do because you'll have immunity. And so that's where I was up to. Then yesterday, Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister of the UK, gave a speech where he alluded to this. He said they're working on an antibody test. They're buying them already, hoping they will work. And then people who have immunity can go back to work, and that will kind of take a little bit of the pressure off as people can start going back to work. See, one of the things that's really important to realize is the official numbers of cases, the real cases are somewhere between, I would guess, 10 and 50 times what you see. In the UK, they've said officially it's 10 or 20 times higher than the official numbers. In places like Spain, like everyone I've talked to who's tried to get tested, you call the number, it's just busy. In a lot of places like the UK, they say if you have symptoms, just self-isolate, don't come in and get tested. So these testing numbers that you see are just what have been officially tested, which are usually the worst cases. So the reason this is important, if there's only like 10,000 cases somewhere, then this whole thing of if you have immunity, you can go back to work, it's not going to affect society that much. But in reality, like my guess is in Spain, there's 200 to 500,000 cases right now. That would be my guess. They'll never have those numbers because, well, actually they will later with the antibodies and they'll see it. That is a big difference. When you have that many people, that can affect a workforce that can really contribute to volunteer to go out and do stuff. So that's what the UK at least is looking at already and thinking about. Not all governments are being the most proactive, but people will start thinking about it. Now, here's my real sci-fi-esque prediction. What happens in a society when a certain group feels restricted, trapped, like they have no rights, and another group has all the freedom and all the rights? What usually happens in societies at that point? So what's going to happen when you have 10% of the people, we'll call them the immunies, when the immunies are walking around and free and doing whatever they want, in some cases because they were the irresponsible ones who didn't protect themselves, who probably spread the virus, who probably went out when they shouldn't have. Not in all cases, but I mean, Tom Hanks, definitely he holds no responsibility. The man is a god. But everyone else, there's a higher chance that people with the virus were irresponsible. Now, again, I know a lot of them are like doctors and nurses and people like who are the most responsible contributing members to society. But it kind of makes sense, right? That you'd have a little bit of a trend that way. So you're going to have people who start to be resentful and they're standing on their balconies, if they even have a balcony, maybe they're at their window, and they're watching these immunies walk around and just live life. That could get very interesting in terms of a sci-fi movie that will potentially be our reality. Now, if I was in charge, and I never wanted to be in politics, but the last month or two I've been thinking I should have been, save the freaking world, is if you want to get this immune badge that allows you to go out, you are not allowed to post anything outside your house on social media. That would be the law I would enforce. So we can see what happens, but that would be what I would be. If you want the freedom to go wherever, you are not allowed to share it online with all the people who are stuck at home, because that could get real weird. So those are my predictions. I then also see high-end travel opening up. There's gonna be all these airplanes sitting around. At some point, they will start running flights again and say, hey, okay, if you have this proof that you're immune, you can now fly, and flights will be way more expensive, but there'll be travel opportunities. I would guess, let's say 4 to 6 months from now, that will come back up. In countries that are really organized and thinking about their economy, like the UK, I think this will happen sooner. In places like Southern Europe, I think it's gonna be much more of a mess, and no one's thinking this far ahead. I mean, okay, I get like 30 seconds of ranting here. Why in January, when the cases were popping up in China, why were governments not just saying publicly, putting out a tender for local businesses to say, hey, we will pay X amount for masks, for equipment, for this. You have to meet these specifications, etc., but we will pay for them. They didn't even need to like take over factories and force companies to make things. They could have just said, we'll buy them at a slight premium and prepare it. If the virus didn't make it to Europe, they could have just had all these extra masks that they could use over the next years. And once it came to Europe like a month ago, why didn't they start this? I mean, now governments are barely starting to convert factories and start making equipment. Okay, rant over. Governments are not going to be the ones being proactive. It's up to you to do so. Think ahead to the future. Think about what things are going to look like plan your life and your business around that, and then plan your days around that. And it's going to be a lot smoother year for you and those you love. Thank you for watching. And before you say it in the comments, yes, you do become immune to this virus. There's a bunch of BS. I've been arguing with a bunch of friends and friends of friends on this because there were a few bad testing situations where someone appeared to get it twice. That's not how the immune system works. You do not get this twice, at least within like a year. This is what all the experts say. You know what's fun though? The people who are going to post that in the comments below are going to post it at like 6 minutes in this video, and they're going to be like, oh, you can't get immunity because this guy, like a friend of a friend of a friend of a dude that I saw on Reddit said that you can get it. And then they're going to say that, not knowing that I already know they're going to say it and cover it at the end of the video. But you're seeing it because you're committed, you're dedicated, you're someone who watches to the end. So thank you for that. And if you don't know who the hell I am, I'm Dan. Hit the subscribe button. I'll see you in another video. Ciao.